A while back, I picked up a pile of mulberry wood that somebody was giving away as firewood. I thought it had an interesting look to the wood. There's a lot of these burls and bumps and had a cool grain and a very interesting color on the end. So I took it home. Once I cut it open, realized how beautiful this grain was. And so I decided I was going to turn my first bowl out of mulberry wood. I chose one of the logs that looked interesting and cut it out on the bandsaw in a bowl shape. You'll notice that some of these edges go down pretty far, so I knew that I would be turning a natural edge bowl, which is a challenge being that this is my first bowl on the lathe. I have to drill a hole for the woodworm screw so that I can start working on the bottom of the bowl first. I started the lathe off at 600 RPMs, and I'm using a roughing gouge to rough out the general shape and make sure everything is square. I move over to a 5/8 inch bowl gouge to start refining the shape of the bowl. I'm happy with how this bowl's turning out. The nice clean profile is going to work really well with that natural edge. And now I need to start working on the bottom. As you can see, I've already taken out a couple of chunks with the bowl gouge. I'll be able to fix these blemishes as I go, but they're important lessons as I'm learning these new tools of how to use these gouges, what angles I need to start off with, what to do and what not to do. I was experiencing a lot of tear out and catches working at this angle. I have since learned that I was using the gouge opposite the way I should have been. Typically you would start with the cutting edge parallel to the wood and then roll it over to make a smoother cut. Taking my time and learning from my mistakes, the bottom is coming together well. And now I move over to a straight edge scraper to start squaring up the tenon that will hold the bowl as I work on the inside. Wanting to refine the surface a bit more, I moved over to a skew. And while I've successfully used a skew on spindle type projects, using it on a bowl proved a little bit more tricky. Ended up getting a lot of tear out, it was catching quite a bit, and it's something I just need to practice more. I ended up having to undo a lot of this work with my gouges. I finally got the bottom to a place I'm happy with, and now it's time to start sanding. I started off with 120 grit sandpaper to kind of more aggressively go after the shape of the bowl and remove some of the tool marks. I then moved over to my drill sander and moved up in grit, starting around 150 and moving up to 600. Before I start applying a finish to the bowl, I need to clean up my lathe area and remove all the dust and shavings. My dust collection system features the Dust Deputy 2.5 and makes quick work of everything. I'll put a link to the dust collection video featuring this product above. I start by applying a lacquer-based sanding sealer, and as I'm applying it, you can really see this grain come to life. There's a lot more depth in this grain than I was expecting, and even a little bit of flash. Once the sanding sealer is dry, I apply a generous coat of paste wax and really work it into the grain. Once the paste wax is dry, I buff it to a nice shine with a clean rag. Look how nice that turned out. I'm really in love with this grain. I took some measurements to determine where the bottom of this bowl should be and made a mark on the drill bit. This all worked out well, however, I probably could have gone a little deeper. The bottom of the bowl ended up a little thick. No big deal, just something to consider for next time. So back to work with the bowl gouge, and we're going to be learning as we go on this one. So taking it easy. Of course, there's going to be a few mistakes, but we're just going to hollow this thing out as best we can. So right about this point, had a couple times where I was catching things, I was feeling a little bit more vibration, and all of a sudden, so yeah, the vibration from turning had damaged the tenon and it loosened from the chuck. So lesson learned there, if you're getting vibration while you're turning, you need to stop everything and check the chuck. In this case, no real damage. The tenon has some cracks in it, but it still holds strong in the chuck, so I was able to finish this out. So I move over to a negative rake scraper, and this is going to help even out and smooth out the bottom of the bowl. Now, again, this is the first time I'm using this, so I'm making some mistakes. What I am learning right now is that I'm holding this at way too high of an angle. I need to lower this scraper down, further down into the bowl, and it's going to make everything go a lot better. I do figure that out over time. I did determine that I wanted to take away a little bit more material down the side of the bowl, so I moved back over to a more aggressive bowl gouge to take away some material. After I did this, I finished everything out with a scraper. Unfortunately, my camera battery died while I was doing this. I did the same sanding and finishing regimen with the inside of the bowl as I did with the outside. Up to 600 grit, then sanding sealer, then paste wax. I turned to form out of a few 2x6s glued together to be able to hold the bowl while I take the tenon off. I'm using this bowl gouge very carefully to sneak up on the tenon. I want to remove as much material as possible and leave as much of the tenon in place so that I can use a saw to take it off. I'm doing this very carefully so I don't damage the bowl. The last thing I want to do is have this thing come loose at this point in time. Unfortunately, things happen. Luckily, I was able to quickly get the lathe stopped and be able to remove the bowl, and there really wasn't any more damage to it. I then used my razor saw to cut off the tenon, and I'll simply sand everything down to its final form and then put the finish on it, and then we can call it done. And that's my first bowl that I finished on my lathe. And I really love how this turned out. Now I know I made some mistakes along the way and I'm learning from them as I go. I'd love to get your thoughts on it. If you have any comments, if you have any advice, please post them down below in the comments section and I'd love to hear from you. Now, I really appreciate y'all following along today. If you like what you saw, give me a big old thumbs up. If you want to see more videos, I'd love to invite you to subscribe to the channel. If you do subscribe, hit that notification button so you know when I post new videos. I appreciate each and every one of you following along. Y'all get out there and make it good. Thanks a lot.